watching Inside Utah Politics.
Time now to debate some of the big stories of the week with the Inside Utah Politics panel. This week we have House Majority Leader Mike Schultz and House Minority Leader Angela Romero. Great to have both of you on the show. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Let's start off with what really became the big story of the week, a bombshell announcement from Representative Chris Stewart officially announcing he plans to resign. He has not released a date on which he will do that yet, but the wheels are now in motion. Let's first off talk about the legacy he will leave behind as a member of Congress. He served there for more than a decade. Representative Romero, you are in his district. What would you say about his legacy?
Well, I just appreciate the congressman and the service he provided the state of Utah. And I wish him well, and family always comes first.
Yeah, that's definitely what a lot of people are saying. Representative Schultz, how do you define his legacy?
Oh, what a great man. You know, Utah has been so fortunate to have Congressman Stewart back in Washington, D.C., representing Utah values. The background that he comes from, the military, Air Force background, he's going to be hard to replace. We're going to miss him sorely. Great person. He's my favorite out of our Washington delegation, and so I'm sad about this.
Let's talk about the impact that his leaving could potentially have, because we're likely looking at filling this seat sometime next year, so it could be vacant for a few months. We have a very delicate situation in Washington, D.C. right now in the House. When you take a look at the balance, it's pretty much razor thin right now. Representative Romero, what impact do you see a potential vacant seat sitting for months having on the work done in Congress? Could that potentially benefit Democrats who right now are in the minority?
I really feel like it doesn't matter whether he's there or not there. Right now in Congress, all they do is debate, and they don't really think about the people. And so it'll be really interesting to see what happens with him leaving and leaving that vacancy. I'm just really more curious about who wants to replace him, both on the Democrat side and on the Republican side.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll be seeing a lot of names jumping into that race once we get into that special election. Representative Schultz, your thoughts on the vacant seat, one less seat for Speaker McCarthy when he goes about trying to push his agenda. How do you think that could play out?
Yeah, we as a legislature in the state of Utah, we will not let that seat sit vacant for very long. We can't afford to. You know, Utah can't afford to lose that representation back in Washington, D.C. And so, like you said, it's such razor thin margins. That's just a part of it. But the biggest thing is we need to make sure that Utah's voice, all of Utah's voice, is heard and represented.
So am I hearing you say there is a part in the law that would allow the legislature to move up those dates? Is that what you foresee happening? Yeah,
if you look at the current statute, it could put us out clear into March or maybe even later than that of next year. It would be unfair to the citizens of the state of Utah to allow that to play out that long. And so we are having discussions right now about what that would look like, moving those dates up and having that seat filled sooner than later.
Representative Romero, would there be any opposition from the minority caucus on that? I don't see any opposition towards that. We already, you know, I want to go back to Representative Schultz's comment about all Utahns being represented. And you look at what happened with redistricting this last session, and I can tell you there are a lot of Utahns that don't feel like they're represented at a congressional level. So for us, you know, I appreciate the congressman, but there are so many things that are not happening in Congress. I just don't really see a significant change for us.
All right. Any thoughts on that, Representative Schultz?
Well, we'll let the voters decide, you know, what they want at the end of the day, who they pick to send back to represent Utah. But, you know, well, holy cow, if you look at the names that are coming out, at least from the Republican side, they're going to have a big field to choose from, which is good. I think that's great for the citizens of Utah.
Yeah, I do anticipate a large field for sure on that. Okay, let's move on to the debt ceiling. We've seen that play out in the nation's capital. The agreement between Speaker McCarthy and President Biden is estimated to be about a $1.5 trillion cut. Representative Romero, first off, your thoughts on, actually let me hit a few highlights. It would include rescinding some COVID relief, some IRS funding, and end the freeze on the student loan payments program that the president has put in. It was also preserve Social Security, Medicaid, and veterans benefits, just to name a few, obviously much deeper than that. But Representative Romero, your thoughts on this compromise that the two sides have come together on?
You know, anytime you can find compromise and people on both sides aren't happy, you've struck a happy medium. And so I'm glad that the president was able to strike that deal in the House, and we have to see what happens in the Senate. There were concerns when it came to the worker requirements when we're talking about SNAP and also relieving that freeze when it comes to student loans. Americans right now are struggling with our economy, and I'm glad that we've found some kind of compromise. But until we as elected officials, and I feel like we do that somewhat here in Utah, but at a congressional level, we're not talking about the concerns of your everyday person. And so I'm glad that this compromise happened, but I just think there are other things we could talk about, like daycare and a variety of other things, instead of unfreezing people's student loans when they're already struggling and trying to put a work permit on people who are receiving assistance. Mm-hmm.
Representative Schultz, the Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, going around and saying that this is the biggest spending cut we've seen in our country's history. Your thought on the way they came together on this?
Well, I first have to say I'm disappointed in the Democrats and President Biden for not going further and not being willing to go further. We have to do something about our federal spending. It's the biggest because our federal spending is out of control. It is on fire. The spending coming out of Washington is causing so many problems in today's economy. It's the number one reason that inflation is through the roof. Over 60% of Americans believe that that we need to reduce the federal spending. And so, you know, while I think it's a good start, we can't be done here. We have got to do more in the way of cuts. And, you know, the economy is just okay. One of the things that's concerning to me is the numbers came out. There are more job openings than we have people on unemployment. And so really the biggest reason the people are struggling is because of inflation. It's not because they can't find a job, it's because of the inflation. And what's causing the inflation is all the federal spending. And you know, the Democrats this last go around, just right before the end of the year, passed that $1.7 trillion spending bill. Like, we have got to get control of our federal spending, or we're going to continue down this path and not being able to control inflation. Over 90% of Americans are concerned about inflation, and so it's something that we have to address. And the number one way to do that is with the federal spending. We have to reduce that.
Representative Romero, I'd like to get more of your thoughts on that. When we look at the national debt, last I checked, it was somewhere in the neighborhood of 32 to 33 trillion. Most of us can't even comprehend that number. Do you see a need to cut back on that? And if so, where would be the appropriate areas to do so? Well,
I don't necessarily see a need to cut back on that. I mean, we've made this compromise. The president has worked with the House, with the Speaker, and there are a lot of people on both sides of the aisle that are not happy with this compromise. But again, I don't think we've done enough when it comes to supporting working families. We can blame it on inflation, but we can also look at the things we're not covering and where we spend our time and our money right now when we're talking at a national level. We have a clown show going on right now in Congress. And so until we really focus on issues that are important to people, like whether there are job openings or whether or not comprehensive immigration reform versus talking about LGBT youth and talking about abortion, we're just not focused in the right direction. So I think this compromise is going in the right direction. Mm.
Representative Schultz, I'd like to get your thoughts on the two sides coming together. We don't see that a lot in Washington. We have a Democrat president with a Republican Speaker of the House coming to the table, putting their minds together, and coming up with something to move forward. Does that encourage you that Congress can move in that direction as far as compromise and getting things done?
Yeah, well, it's better than nothing, right? I mean, $1.5 trillion in over 10 years is better than nothing. And so I am grateful that something happened. Although, you know, I do feel like it would have, I wish the Democrat Party would have came with better solutions. And, you know, it was just a couple weeks ago that the Democrats saying we're not even going to negotiate. Like, we've got to find ways to bridge the gaps on some of these things. And I think this is a good start, but we need to do more.
Okay, unfortunately, we have run out of time. Really appreciate both of you being here and sharing your insight. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Glenn.
Stay with us. We'll be right back with more